Thank you for joining our webinar today. We will begin in 3 minutes. Thank you for joining our webinar today. We will begin very shortly.
Hello, everybody. Good afternoon and welcome to the ATARC Quantum Working Group's webinar. My name is Allison Schwartz. I'm the industry co-chair of the Quantum Working Group. Congressman Langevin is running just a few minutes late. And so we're going to change up the agenda just a little bit to give him time to join us. We are really excited about this event today because it's a way to put a little bit of tangibility around what quantum computing can do today, especially in the case for national defense and military applications. So with that, I'm going to introduce Alex Condello, who is going to showcase a little bit of what D-Wave has done in with the Australian Army. And then once Congressman Langevin events, we'll introduce him. So with that, Alex, I'll turn it over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm glad to be here today. My name is Alex and I'm the manager of our applications development technologies and tools here at D-Wave. If you're not familiar with D-Wave, we've been building quantum computers for the last 20 years and we've been making them commercially available for the last 10. And so today I'm going to be showing you a demo that makes use of our live system as well as our hybrid solvers and finally our applications mandate. So as I mentioned, everything I'm going to be showing today is running live on the cloud on existing technology. Nothing that I'm going to be doing today is sort of pre-scripted or anything like that. And I want to show you solving a particular problem. So imagine that, if you will, that I am in an emergency situation or a battlefield situation where I have a collection of resources at a central depot rather, and I would like to distribute those resources to a group of different force elements that are located around the city. You can imagine that this problem, is very specific to sort of this battlefield, but it's also very general. You can imagine that these are, I'm distributing vaccines, or I'm distributing people, or I'm distributing supplies, or I'm laying cables. I mean, all of these different problems can be represented in this problem class. So let's take a quick look. Let's give this a run just to give you a sense of what we're talking about. So this is going to be running, as I mentioned, on our hybrid quantum stack, making use of both quantum and classical resources to solve this problem. And to start off, I'm going to be using drones. So here I have 10 different locations that I would like to distribute resources to. And I have 2 different drones to do it. And as you can see on first pass, we get more or less what we wanted to see. 2 very reasonable looking paths that distribute to those different locations. When you're in a live demo, it's always nice when things work the way that you expect. So that's good. But drones are in some sense a best case scenario, right? And I'm not really solving a very large problem here. This isn't that realistic yet. So let's make it a bit harder. So first thing, I'm going to change the number of locations. Instead of just distributing to 10 different forces, I'm going to distribute to, say, 75. And instead of having just 2 vehicles, I'm going to be using, say, 8 vehicles. And instead of using delivery drones, which can go in straight lines, I'm going to make use of trucks. Now, this problem's quite a bit harder because we're using a real image here of Rockhampton, a city in Australia that we used because we were working with our friends in the Australian Department of Defense on this project. And so trucks can't have to follow street rules. In an emergency preparedness situation, they might have to follow one-way streets. Or in a battlefield situation, you might imagine that there's rubble on the streets or different things that can increase the complexity of this problem. And so here, we can see an example of our solution. And again, this sort of passes the sniff test. We can see that we had a truck, this sort of purple truck has distributed to these locations. We had a gray truck that distributed to these. And we can, in fact, scroll down and see a little bit more detail. In fact, I can see for each of my individual 8 trucks, I can see how far they traveled in terms of meters. So 3 kilometers or 1.6 kilometers. I can see the number of forces that they served, the amount of water, food, and other supplies that they distributed. And I can, in total, see the total distance that was traveled by my solution. So in this case, we traveled a total of about 24 kilometers for over. And we're using kilometers here because this was done with a Commonwealth country. So I'm sure we could change this all to be in miles and such. Okay, so we can see that using our hybrid technology, we are able to solve a problem at a pretty legitimate scale. I mean, this problem is in the complexity class NP hard, which for those of you who have sort of a math or computer science background, you'll know these are problems that become exponentially more difficult the more elements that I add. And so even at this scale, the number of possible solutions to this problem is truly enormous. I mean, there is over 5 to the 67 possible answers to this problem that we have to be able to search through. So I want to finish this part of the live demo by comparing this to classical, because it is absolutely the case that this is the kind of problem that there are existing classical solutions to, and hybrid is another solution. So let's take a look at what that comparison is. This time I'm going to be using a particular algorithm, a classical algorithm called k-means clustering. This is one of many state-of-the-art algorithms in this space. There's many different algorithms of different strengths and weaknesses. This is just one of them. And again, it gives a solution that looks pretty good. But when we scroll down, we can see that this time we went 29 kilometers, which is a longer distance than we traveled before when we were using our hybrid solution. We haven't found as good of a solution as we did before. So I next want to talk a little bit about the future, because as I mentioned, everything that I've been showing right now is running on our live systems, our live production systems. But we're doing some work right now on some future hybrid solvers that make better use of quantum, that can solve different types of use cases, can solve different types of constraints. And I want to show you a little bit of a preview of some of the results we got on a prototype solver there. So in this case, we used a benchmark set from Christofides and Elan. These are the same class of problems, these multi-vehicle routing problems, last mile logistics style problems that I showed before. And in this time, we ran for a fixed amount of time. So we ran both our hybrid solver and a classical solver for exactly 5 seconds. This actually raises a point that I want to dwell on for just one moment, which is that the place that we can really excel and the place that quantum really can excel, especially in the space of these hybrid heuristics, are in these situations where you have a limited time to solve the problem. So say you only have 5 seconds to make a decision, which, as you can imagine, in the context of, say, an earthquake or on the battlefield, you have very limited time to find good solutions, and speed is really all that matters. So here, as I said, we've compared a classical and our hybrid solver for 5 seconds. And when we do that, what we see is sort of 3 different regimes. On the leftmost here, there are a collection of problems that say that, so this is delivering to 23 locations using 3 vehicles. This is 22 locations using 4 vehicles, where the problem is in some sense not hard enough for hybrid. The classical solver was able to find a better solution in the same amount of time. In the middle here, we have a collection of examples that are kind of in the middle, where we are able to see better results with our hybrid solver than with our classical, given the same amount of time. And these are, say 51 locations with 5 trucks or 101 locations with 8 trucks. That's the sort of scale. And then on the far right, we have a collection of examples where we weren't able to solve this problem at all with classical. We were only able to solve it with hybrid. Now, the example that I gave live and the plot that I'm showing here are on a specific set of instances comparing to a specific classical solver. And it's absolutely, and as you can see, there are cases where hybrid is providing sort of unique value. There's cases where hybrid is providing special value. And there's cases where hybrid is not, it's not as good as the classical solution. And we're really interested in tackling these real world practical problems so that we can explore, where hybrid can provide value. And D-Wave prides itself on being the practical quantum computing company, and that is part of that picture is showing these different regimes and understanding where your particular problem and your particular scenario falls into. So thank you so much for the time and watching my demo. I will toss it back to Allison.
Thanks so much, Alex. I appreciate that. We're still waiting on the congressman, so I actually have one quick question for you. And for folks who are participating, Kirsten said in the chat, if you would like to add questions in, please don't hesitate to write it in the chat. But could you explain a little bit about, you talked about hybrid solvers and we're talking about quantum computing. Could you just talk a little bit about like what is a hybrid solver, and so folks have a little bit of understanding?
That's a very good question. Thanks. So one of the things that we're seeing increasingly in the quantum space is an increasing degree of sophistication in the stack that we use to solve problems. So when I first joined D-Wave about 5 years ago, in quantum computing, the state of the art was to take whatever your problem was and compress it down into something that can try to fit on a quantum computer, and then have the quantum computer solve in sort of that whole problem, and then undo that transformation on the way out. This is actually not a very smart thing to do. If you think about just using your computer locally, you probably have a GPU in your computer and a CPU that are good at different types of resources. If you're making use of cloud resources, you have different types of resources that you might make available of different strengths. And when you're solving a real world practical problem, you want to use each of these different resources to their strengths. And so in this demo that I'm showing, and more generally when we're talking about applications, we talk about hybrid, which is where we want to solve the problem on a combination of classical and quantum resources so that we're getting the best of both worlds. We want to use the quantum resources to unblock or accelerate a classical algorithm. Because, as I demonstrated, k-means clustering, for instance, is perfectly capable of solving this problem. We don't need to completely reinvent that wheel. We just need to improve it. We need to find places that quantum can add value. And it also adds more robustness. You can feel assured that by using a hybrid solution, if you're in that regime where classical provides more value, you have the classical side. And if you're on the regime where quantum provides more value, you have the quantum computer there. Does that answer the question?
Yes, that does. Thank you, Alex. I really appreciate that. We do have another question in the chat, but we can save that for later. And I see the congressman is here. So for now, I will turn it over to Maeva.
Thank you so much, Allison. Hello, everyone. My name is Maeva Gonda, and I'm the founding chair of the Quantum Working Group at ATARC. Thank you so very much for joining us today. This room was formed to encourage collaboration within the quantum ecosystem. So we are super thrilled that we've come this far with this new research that we've been working on. And I'd like to congratulate Allison for stepping up and leading this initiative. Allison Schwartz is industry chair. Allison's with D-Wave, and the title of the paper is Applied Quantum Computing for Today's Military. Allison, thank you so much for all your work. And before she discusses the paper with today's panelists, I'm pleased for the privilege to introduce today's keynote speaker, Congressman Jim Langevin. Congressman Langevin has dedicated many years of public service at the federal and state levels for the hardworking citizens of Rhode Island. He's a senior member of the House Armed Services Committee, where he's the chairman of the Intelligence and Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee. Additionally, he serves on the subcommittees on sea power and projection forces, as well as tactical air and land forces. As the co-founder and co-chairman of the bipartisan Congressional Cybersecurity Caucus, Congressman Langevin led the way in raising awareness of cybersecurity issues in Congress and fostering dialogue and debate on the critical questions surrounding cybersecurity. Congressman Langevin chaired the Center for Strategic and International Studies Commission on Cybersecurity for the 44th presidency, which made policy recommendations to President Obama. Congressman Langevin has introduced the Personal Data Notification and Protection Act to ensure consumers are appropriately alerted when their sensitive information is compromised. To further improve cybersecurity, Congressman Langevin has helped introduce the Executive Cyberspace Coordination Act, which aims to strengthen the country's defenses against cyber threats and reflects concerns listed in the Commission's report, which includes vulnerability of critical infrastructure. Congressman Langevin, thank you so very much for accepting our invitation to speak at today's event on quantum computing. Thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for that very kind introduction, those very kind words. I'm honored to be with you today. I want to thank you for having me here. First of all, can you hear me okay? Am I coming across all right?
Yes, sound fantastic. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, again, thank you. Really humbled and honored to be with you. And I know you're in for a great seminar today with a great lineup of speakers. I want to start off by apologizing. An event I had previously ran over, and I just just able to get on your event. So looking forward to just sharing a few thoughts with you all for just a few minutes. And then again, you have, I know, great speakers yet to come. But as you mentioned, I am Jim Langevin, and I chair the subcommittee on cyber innovation, technologies, and information systems. We actually just had a change in subcommittee alignment and titles. That's new this Congress. It was formerly the Emerging Threats and Capabilities Subcommittee, but because of the added growth and attention in innovative technologies, including the fact that in the past NDAA, we added so many cyber provisions to the National Defense Authorization Act. We had to actually add a whole new title to the NDAA, just to kind of show you why a realignment was so important. And so I just want to thank ATARC, first of all, for inviting me again to speak and really being able to draw attention to the connection between quantum science and our collective defenses. I know we have a lot of work to do. This is an emerging field of study and technology, and the best is truly yet to come. Quantum applications are one of many emerging technologies, I believe, that will dramatically transform the battle space. Now, I've also said this about artificial intelligence, cyber, and 5G, and electronic warfare, among other technologies. At this point, I think I'm pretty much sounding like a broken record for those who have heard me speak before, but so bear with me. But I really believe in what I say, and at this point, sadly, the story remains the same. Science fiction is becoming fact and reality too soon, and our military really has to do more to field this new technology to keep up, because our enemies and adversaries are clearly not standing still. They are investing in these capabilities, and although we have many advantages because of our technological innovation and investments, our enemies and adversaries know this, and they've invested heavily in areas that would undermine that advantage and interfere maybe in an asymmetric way with the development of these capabilities and these technologies. And they develop their own capabilities and technologies that put us at risk. I always viewed my role as chairman of the subcommittee, whether under the previous title or the new one, that we need to identify areas where we have an advantage and do everything we can to keep it, and look at those areas, identify those areas where our enemies and adversaries have invested in capabilities that undermine our advantage or have grown their own inherent capabilities and create an advantage. And we need to undermine that and turn that curve around, bend it in our favor. So no shortage of challenges, but one of my roles as chair of the Innovative Technology Subcommittee is to paint a picture of what the future of warfare looks like. Many of you in the audience already know it. Analysts will easily access an array of data from thousands of sensors, autonomous vehicles, and soldiers' headsets, keeping, tying all that information and that technology together. Commanders will make more sophisticated decisions and do it faster. We will transmit voice, mission, and video data to deploy troops in dense urban or forested environments and much more quickly. Aircraft, ships, and unmanned systems will talk to one another the way that applications in your household talk to your Amazon shopping list. Competitive edge and credible deterrence won't just mean the most powerful weapon system. They will require interact and coordinate across all domains quickly and effectively. So quantum, I believe, makes or breaks this future. That's a fact. Quantum encryption algorithms will secure those communication lines, and its computing potential will let us encrypt at scale. Quantum capabilities will also help us detect our adversaries' stealth platforms and decode their sensitive communications. We could operate in GPS contested environments with greater precision, extending the line of sight and finally seeing around corners. Our networks will manage traffic from all these autonomous systems and the signals that they emit. Quantum science will be a foundational technology for a hyper-connected world in integrated battle space. The question is, will it be our weapons and communication systems or those of our adversaries? Or will our adversaries be able to control our advanced weapons and communication systems? Daunting questions for sure. As more systems connect to a network, we assume greater risk that something will be jammed or compromised, putting additional systems and service members at risk. If other militaries invest successfully in quantum code breaking, our lines of communication, databases, and networks will no longer be secure. If you thought that the SolarWinds, Microsoft's Exchange server, or OPM hacks were devastating, and they were, imagine what next generation code breaking can do. If other militaries have an extended line of sight, and we do not, our forward deployed troops no doubtly are in harm's way. If other militaries develop quantum sensors and can detect easily submarines, how survivable and credible is the sea-based leg of the nuclear triad? So while this technology is far from mature, we do not want to sit back and let it become tomorrow's problem. Indeed, I believe we have all learned from the coronavirus pandemic that we absolutely must confront challenges before they become crises. Our adversaries are looking ahead, and so must we. So what do we do, and what can we do? Well, I see 4 areas where we can focus our attention and efforts. The first is to fund defense research, particularly early stage basic research. The US government has led the way in many emerging technologies, achieving breakthroughs that maintain our competitive edge and improve civilians' lives. A great recent example I can point to is the messenger RNA COVID vaccine that grew out of the defense research investments 5 to 10 years ago, long before the pandemic, in which we find ourselves. Yes, it came out of DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. DARPA was created after Sputnik to avoid strategic surprise. That's where the high risk, high payoff work is done in our most advanced research in the country. And we need to continue to double down in this type of research. Our basic defense research dollars should do the same for quantum computing, sensing, and communications to enhance our understanding of this powerful science. There is so much about quantum physics that we do not yet know, and it is truly mind-bending. Upfront investments will pay dividends, I believe, down the road, and we need to invest now and not wait. So we should also encourage the department to buy what quantum companies are producing. We must remember that Silicon Valley got its name from government investments in research and partnerships with academic institutions, which in turn grew new technology and encouraged technical talent to spin out innovative companies rather than stay as academic researchers. So the department bought the products of those new companies, which kept them alive to continue their work. Today, to support the transition of mostly academic research into sustainable technical area and over the valley of death, the department must figure out how to be a buyer of quantum computing market products, even if just for use by the academic research community at the moment. The third area to focus on is active engagement in standards setting related to quantum computing, sensing, and communications. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, has made a lot of progress in validating algorithms that can withstand quantum computer attacks, setting the standards for using those algorithms in existing cryptographic applications, and laying multiple pathways for encryption that companies can follow. So they will release standardized quantum resistant cryptography sometime next year, and we should be paying close attention. Now comes the part of requiring these standards to be used in critical infrastructure, communication systems, and weapon systems so that they are ready for quantum-enabled encryption. They're ready before quantum-enabled encryption becomes a reality. And we must actively engage with international standards bodies so that global standards suit the interests of the United States and our allies, and not the other way around. So what brings me to my fourth focus area, which is a quantum literate workforce within a broader digitally literate workforce. We need more civil servants who understand the science and national security imperative so that they can engage in international forums. Our commanders, flag officers, and civilian defense leaders must also understand the potential and risk that quantum brings. And we absolutely need more physicists, scientists, engineers, and mathematicians to develop and deploy new methods of encryption, decryption, and computing power. So I've said this for all fields of emerging technology, but quantum is truly an area where we must develop homegrown STEAM talent as early as elementary and middle school. We have to remember that the kids growing up today are digital natives. They understand and are immersed in technology in ways that this generation and older generations are learning about and trying to retrofit, if you will, and kind of figuring out, where kids in technology take to it like fish to water, and again, are digital natives, and they understand technology in ways that we can't truly comprehend. So we must also train our current DoD workforce in statistics, coding, and computer science, and we must attract the smartest talent from abroad. Our universities cultivate researchers from all over the world. We have to harness that talent. We must make it easy for them to stay. We must also offer expedited citizenship to future Nobel laureates of the world in mathematics, physics, and critical technologies. To that end, I plan on introducing legislation to address expedited citizenship later in the spring, because great power competition is also a global race for talent. So once we've hired these bright minds, we must quickly put them to work and not sideline them until they get a clearance. Last year, I led legislation in the NDAA to create unclassified workspaces so that new hires can quickly get to work while waiting for their security clearances. Going forward, employees will not have to forego a paycheck for several months while waiting to serve their country. To that end, the past three National Defense Authorization Acts, or NDAAs, implemented and updated the Defense Quantum Information Science and Technology Research and Development Program, which directed the Secretary of Defense to implement a program that will ensure global superiority of the United States in quantum information science, coordinate with the department and across the interagency on science and technology research, develop and manage defense quantum research, accelerate transition and deployment into the armed forces, and support the department's workforce and infrastructure needs related to quantum information and science and technology. Most recently, the NDAA directed the Secretary to produce an annual list of technical problems and research challenges that quantum computers could address within the next few years. The department must now work with medium and small quantum computing businesses and help them provide these private sector capabilities to government, industry, and academic researchers. Importantly, the law directs the Secretary to coordinate with the National Quantum Coordination Office and the Subcommittee on Quantum Information Science and the National Science and Technology Council. The subcommittee includes representatives from the Department of Defense and the Director of National Intelligence to tie these efforts together to build momentum. Given the national security imperative, we must turn our attention to this area sooner rather than later. On that note, I look forward to supporting the subcommittee's assessments and recommendations of federal infrastructure requirements, workforce, and opportunities for international cooperation with strategic allies on R&D efforts in quantum information science and technology. We hope the subcommittee can provide actionable recommendations like those submitted from the Cyberspace Solarium Commission and the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. Thanks to these commissions, we are profoundly updating existing law related to cyberspace and AI to address the national security challenges and take advantage of novel technological capabilities as they come online. We also vastly raised awareness and common understanding of these issue areas. At minimum, we need to do the same with quantum science and comprehensively address my earlier calls to invest in defense research, engage in standard setting, and cultivate a quantum-ready workforce. If we can do that, then we will be ready for the battle space of the future. With that, I just wanted to say thank you again for inviting me to speak today and share some exciting field. I applaud you for putting this event together, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the seminar. Thank you.
Thank you so very much. Thanks again, Congressman Langevin. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Thank you. Enjoy.
Thank you
so much.
Allison, thanks again for leading this paper and this research. It's all yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited for to being able to introduce the panelists who will be able to help kind of express a little bit of, as Congress was taking on the intent of how do you incorporate quantum information science into the national security space. We have some amazing distinguished panelists who are going to kind of help put a little bit of meat on the bones of that. So let me quickly first do an introduction of the panelists, and then we'll get into questions. And I see that there are already some Q&As, which I'll ask to the panelists as we move forward. And please continue to add some in there. Unfortunately, the congressman can't stay for Q&As, but if you have some that you would like us to share with the staff, we can take that. So our distinguished panelists today, we have Dr. Terrell France. Terrell is a professor at Harrisburg University, where he's building the quantum technology capacity for the university, both in teaching and in research. He comes from the software side of the quantum equation, and he holds a doctorate in organizational change from Pepperdine University, and a second doctorate in computer science from Carnegie Mellon. He is also a member of the ATARC Quantum Working Group, and his expertise has been invaluable in helping us use understanding kind of how the current technologies can be applied today and what are those possible outcomes. We have also Dr. Celia Merzbacher. She is the executive director of QEDC, which is the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. And she has a distinguished career in Washington, D.C. She's been the vice president of a innovation of partnerships for semiconductor consortiums. She served as assistant director of technology and R&D in the OSTP at the White House from 2003 to 2008. And she also sits and serves on the executive director of the President's Council for Advisors on Science and Technology. And she began her career at the Naval Research Laboratory, where her research has led to 6 patents and 50 technical publications. And then rounding out our panel is Paul Steimers. Paul is a partner in public policy and law at K&L Gates, and he's advocating on a variety of emerging technologies. He is also the founder and the executive director of the Quantum Industry Coalition, which is a group of companies involved in the quantum fields, and is committed to helping be drivers of US quantum leadership. So first, I'd like to thank everybody for their time during this panel. And I'm gonna just start in with a couple highlight questions, and then we can get to some of the ones that have been posted. So I'm going to start with Terrell. As a member of the working group, I would love for you to give a bit of a highlight on the draft paper. And folks who are registered for this event, you've gotten a copy of the draft paper. We specifically made it draft because we're loving to have open comments. So we're going to have about 14 days, business days after this for comments, and close this out and finalize it in mid-May. So with that, Dr. Franz, could you talk a little bit about the white paper and kind of some of the great learnings that the working group came out with it?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Allison. So Allison and the ATARC team has been working on this paper for a few months now. And really the idea is to try to identify some short-term use cases that the military may or may not choose to take advantage of. But you know, we list out a dozen use cases in particular, specific things, but I really think of it as really 4 types of use cases if I were to group them up. I do want to keep it short here, but you know, you have a set of use cases that have to do with simulations. So as a representative mentioned, he talked about battlefield simulations and those sort of things. So simulation is a really important use case in that, you know, even though computers are very powerful today, the task of simulating very complex activities is increasing rapidly. So these quantum computers, we believe, will really provide a lot more capacity in the number of variables that you can simulate, as well as you know, the fidelity of the information you have. You know, one little quick example is perhaps you know, the space debris that came close to, I think it was the space station recently. You know, their inches matter, and you know, I think we'll need that sort of fidelity going forward. The second thing is what Alex was talking about in the D-Wave computer, which is particularly good at, is the area of optimization, and you know, doing compute and getting some granular details out of optimization. So things like logistics, predictive management is mentioned in the paper, which is an interesting one, as well as energy management. I'm not in the energy community, but when I talk to folks in that industry, it seems that the optimization, and that there's a lot of work to be done in moving energy around, electric energy in particular. So we think that you know, optimization in the energy space will be another near-term use case that will have some value. A third one out of 4 is medical advances. Most people, I certainly did not know until I started digging into it, the MRI machine is a quantum device. So beyond that, when it comes to computing, I think we could have sped up the time to a COVID vaccine, for example, by having you know, really powerful computing devices, et cetera, focused in on medical advances. And then finally, the fourth large group is in communications, and this one is particularly of interest because, in fact, this morning the European Union held an event on quantum computing or communication standards, and the Chinese are way out in front of us, and that becomes an issue, particularly geopolitically and in the military sense.
Thank
But
you.
there, but read the paper for more good details.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Terrell. Celia, I'd love to turn this over to you a little bit. Given that QEDC kind of has government as well as academic as well as industry, you kind of sit in like the nexus of all of those. Could you talk a little bit about kind of QEDC? Because I'm sure most of the folks may not have heard of you, heard of the organization. Kind of what are the top kind of use cases and learnings that you guys are working on, or a movement that you guys are working on to help progress quantum technologies in the United States?
Thanks, Allison. Yeah, it's great to be here. QEDC is a relatively young organization. It was called for in the 2018 National Quantum Initiative Act, which directed NIST to establish a consortium of stakeholders. And as you mentioned, that's a very broad collection of actors in this space. Innovation takes academic researchers, national laboratories, industry and government, as well as standards developers and other critical sort of parts of the whole innovation ecosystem. And QEDC welcomes all of those people to come together and figure out where they need to be working together and what they each bring to the puzzle, if you will. So QEDC today has about 150 plus members. Over 100 of those are corporate members. Right now, we have limited it to US-based companies, but we plan, and we'll maybe talk about in a minute, expanding that to include non-US headquartered companies and others. But it's really, it's not a government agency, but it has government support, as well as the support of the industry. So like you said, it's really a place where everybody comes together and is focused on the mission, which is to enable and grow the quantum industry in the US. And an industry requires a supply chain, and that's where some of these problems that we've been talking about come in. The need for optimization, the need for new materials, and the ability to model and simulate things that until now we couldn't. So there are a lot of use cases among our members, which extend even to the end user types of organizations like banks and pharmaceutical companies, and many, if not all, of the big defense contractors who are members of QEDC. So we have those folks kind of pulling the technology toward their needs and applications. And then we have component suppliers and system developers who are helping to meet those needs. And we have very good engagement with the defense and intelligence communities. In fact, we have one committee that's dedicated to looking at specifically how quantum is going to help address their needs. So it's a very flexible organization. And as I say, it's welcoming of all parts of the ecosystem. So anybody who's interested, go to quantumconsortium.org and you can find out more about how to get involved. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Celia. Paul, turning to the Quantum Industry Coalition being an industry, and I'm going to kind of connect this in with a question that was asked in the audience. I know that a lot of the work today in quantum has to be a collaboration between government and businesses. How is kind of the business engaging with the government in this? And specifically, the call up from the question is, how do small businesses get engaged, and kind of what pain points are you hearing from membership, or how or is QIC kind of tackling this partnership with small businesses and quantum computing industry and government?
Well, thank you, Allison, and thanks to ATARC for having me on the panel. It's a very good question, and I think the answer is that it's a it's a challenge. It's a challenge for something as big and in some ways ponderous as the federal government to operate at the scale and speed that small businesses in particular need to work at. And the good news is, especially with respect to the Defense Department, they know that, and they're trying to get better at it. And this is something that I was at an event with General Hyten, the Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, where he talked about how singularly focused he is on speeding up the process by which the Department of Defense is able to get things done, and that includes procurement and on-ramping these providers. One of the things that helps with that is putting out requirements and letting people satisfy those requirements rather than having to go through processes. If you put out a process, somebody has to go all the way through the process. That's great for folks like me and regulatory lawyers and that sort of thing. But what's best for innovators is to be given a need and figure out a way to meet that need. And so there's a lot of effort being expended both within the Defense Department, in the Armed Services Committees and so forth, trying to help make that possible. And the Quantum Industry Coalition is certainly for efforts like that, efforts to bring the power of the American business community to the government, whether it's the military side or the scientific side, what have you, to get more done. Thanks for the question.
Thank you so much, Paul. That's awesome. Really appreciate that. And I'm glad that there's an engagement effort in small businesses. I know, Celia, QEDC also has a large small business engagement. So wondering if you want to kind of talk about how small businesses can get engaged, because it has been a few questions that have been placed in the Q&A.
Great, thank you. Glad there's interest. Yes, our membership is predominantly small companies, and I did a recent sort of evaluation, and about 80% are smaller than 300, and about half of those, 40, are smaller than 10. So we have a lot of startups and people who want to grow to be a big company, and then we have some who are small businesses that are providing important critical components to the people who are developing the integrated systems. So we're really looking, and as I said, we're pretty new, so I'm really making it a priority this year to focus on how to support and help those smaller companies, because they don't have the resources to wander through all of the processes that government has necessarily. And as we heard from Representative Langevin, the government may be one of the biggest early customers. And so trying to make that process easy and help them to partner and successfully grow their company is something that I see as, that'll be a definition of success for me, for sure.
Wonderful, thank you.
And I will just add,
yeah,
we do have a fee structure that's based on size. So the small companies pay considerably less to belong.
Thank you. Terrell, there's a question that was asked here, and I would love if you could take a stab, especially given you are able to, as a professor, take really complex problems and distill them down to make it easy for folks to understand. So I appreciate that, especially somebody who's not a physicist myself. But there's a question that was put in the Q&A that was talking about, we heard about these military use cases in there, the military side in the ATARC draft white paper, but what can be translated as kind of near-term commercial applications, or maybe civilian side versus not battle and warfare? Oh, Terrell, you're on mute.
Gotcha. Thanks for the loaded question. This is a difficult one, but on the civilian side, near term, all right, I don't think many people really see much use for quantum computing on the civilian side, other than Samsung releasing a quantum based random number generator in their phone a few weeks ago. Quantum computing is a very powerful device if we can embrace all that physics that you mentioned. But it's particularly geared, the benefit is for really difficult problems, not scheduling meetings, not watching videos on YouTube, etc. So most consumers, I think, at least in the near term lifetime, will not be directly impacted by quantum computing. Although companies make it available for those who want to learn about quantum computing, it's readily available for free, in fact, in some places. But it's for the really big problems, like breaking cybersecurity on your phone, unfortunately, or doing these really complex simulations. So it's kind of like we have supercomputers today. So if you're using the Summit supercomputer at Oak Ridge National Lab today for something, I think you will really value a quantum computer because it'll take you to that next level. But unless somebody sees something that I and many others don't see, it doesn't really look like there's a direct impact on consumers. Indirect, absolutely.
Great, thank you so much. I'm going to pull from one of the questions posed, and I'm going to combine two of them into one question. Obviously, Congressman Langevin mentioned the need for workforce development and education and building that. You know, there is a question here about the quantum workforce shortage and what are the plans to develop the right talent to meet those demands, as well as a question about how do we bring scientists who may have left the US because they didn't feel like there was enough funding in science to bring them back and onshore that knowledge and talent back. So with that, I'd love to kind of ask, I'll start with you, Celia, because I know you're doing a bit on workforce at QEDC, and then I can open it up to the other panelists. You know, how do you see the workforce development and then, you know, building that quantum talent, but also bringing back some talent that might have left our shores?
Sure. So this is an area of intense interest by all parts of the chain of the pipeline. So government is, and Congress is interested in supporting the development of workforce. Universities is where education happens, and there will be a need for a very broad and diverse workforce, including technicians who perhaps have a 2-year degree all the way through PhDs and people with very advanced and specialized education and knowledge. We did do a survey of our membership last year, at the end of last year, asking about what jobs they thought they would be filling in the next 5 years or so, and what the knowledge and skills they would want those people to have and what degrees. And so we have a very rich data set that we're analyzing and planning to publish and make very publicly available, because it's most useful to the community, that broad community that's going to be educating those workers, and to the students themselves who want to know, what should I take? So look forward to getting that out, and you can kind of keep an eye on news about that. But the basic sort of lessons or findings of the study is that there is a very broad set of skills, and many of them are not quantum. So if somebody is a photonics expert or a computer science and engineering expert, they can move into this field and maybe just take 1 or 2 additional courses to get some quantum under their belt to make themselves really desirable and able to compete in the workforce, in the workplace. Also, a lot of universities, and I think Terrell can speak to this, are starting to put together somewhat tailored or modified or supplemental quantum programs that will help to fill this gap that we're in right now. So it's a short-term problem, I think, but it is a problem now. There aren't enough people with the 5 years of experience that every employer wants. And so I think employers across the board are going to have to be fairly broad in the people that they look at, and also be willing and hopefully able to give them some professional development once they get on board. It also applies to people who are in their early or mid-career who want to make a pivot. So we do need programs that can do some upskilling of the existing workforce as well.
Thanks
On
so
the
much.
other part, I may flip that one to Paul to talk about the policy issues of trying to attract or re-attract people who we would want to come and work here. There certainly are lots of opportunities, and Terrell maintains a database of job openings and makes those publicly available. So it's easy to find opportunities if people want to come back.
Thanks, Celia. Go ahead, Terrell.
Yeah, let me just add one thing to what Celia was saying. And I think in the spirit of growing the workforce, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to join this community and industry. You don't need to be a computer scientist. You don't need to be a mathematician. There are jobs out there for marketing people, for salespeople. I mean, Paul, I believe you're a trained lawyer, I would venture to guess, right? And he's deeply involved. Celia, I think, is a physicist, I believe. But the point is that, I mean, if you see the vision and the growth and the fun, but the need for this workforce and this technology, you don't need to be a PhD. There's plenty of jobs out there that are more on the periphery, and there are definitely job openings in that space. So get involved.
I love the call. Paul, what about from attracting talent from an industry perspective?
Yeah, and apologies, I've got a printer that just came to life here. When I founded the coalition, I was surprised by how focused the members were, the corporate members, on workforce development as an imperative. They are desperate for qualified quantum employees, and they're desperate for ways to extend the funnel down into middle school, even in terms of starting people on a path that leads to being somebody who can be involved in the cutting edge of quantum science and quantum R&D. We also have an immigration issue. And that is that we want to attract people who could be the CTO of a company while not opening ourselves up to folks who want to just take technology back home with them when they leave. And so we need to try and find a balance there. The final thing I'll say is with respect to trying to entice people to come to the United States, it's really two things. It's making the United States a good place to do science and making the United States a good place to do business. And both of those are a matter of some fairly comprehensive policy from tax rates to funding levels. But as long as we're making progress on both of those, I think we'll attract the right people.
Thanks so much, Paul. Yes, Celia.
I'll just add one thing, because I think a lot of the people in the audience maybe are affiliated with government, and the government needs, and the congressman alluded to these, are also growing in this area. And in some sense, I think they have trouble. And he talked about some policy measures that he's tried to promote to ease that and make it easier for the government to hire good people. But they need to think about how to leverage and take advantage of their strengths. They've got amazing problems for people to work on. They've got wonderful facilities all over the place. And so getting students in the door and giving them a taste of what they're working on, I think would be very attractive to young people today. And so, I wholeheartedly support and would like to work, because QEDC has government partnerships, connecting the students to those opportunities as well.
Great, thank you. I have a quick question for Terrell, direct question for Terrell, and then after that I have one question for the whole panel. Terrell, this comes from the participants, specifically in quantum networking standards. Do you think China is ahead of the US aside from QKD?
In standards? No, my guts tell. I'm very familiar with China and what's going on there, and I'm trying to combine that with the quantum industry. But I think they might be at par with where we are, because just looking, they don't advertise a lot of things, just like our private industries don't either. But many of their scientists have been trained in the United States or in the West, and so. And they've gone through the PhD programs, et cetera. So I have a lot of suspicion that they will progress very rapidly, because they've got the raw talent there, and and they've got the government focus. It's not directly mentioned in the 5-year plan that just came out, but it is alluded to in the notion of advanced technologies. So. And who knows what the military is up to, in any country. So,
let me just say, really 15 seconds on standards, and that is, there's a lot of concern about that, and China is sending very large delegations to certain standards meetings. But it depends on the organization, but they operate in general on a very open, transparent, process-based way that is intended to allow everyone to have a voice. And so shame on us if the US doesn't send people, but just having more people in the room doesn't mean you get more votes in general. And so it's really driven towards finding good standards, and in general, the best standards prevail. There always are at some point winners and losers. We all know sort of the Betamax VHS story, but I think that it's certainly not too late. And I think it's a sort of call to action for industry to get involved with standard setting. But I have confidence in the system, I guess.
Thanks, Celia. We have about 4 minutes left. So for this question, I'm going to ask each of you to keep your answer to 1 minute each. This came also from a participant. From his view, government seems to support mostly in terms of research, but would a more direct public-private partnership enable joint product development? be helpful or a hindrance? So with that, I'm going to start with you, Paul. Do you think a public-private partnership focus would be help or a hindrance?
I think there's a lot of opportunities for that. I think it is helpful to move things a little bit further along the development line rather than the research line. And that's something that there's a lot of work underway on. In fact, the Endless Frontier Act that has just been introduced is a big play to do just that, to create a new directorate at the National Science Foundation that's focused on moving things along in that direction. If you go too far in that direction, you're picking winners and losers in the marketplace and you run into problems. But we've got a little ways we can move before we run into that problem. Great question.
Thank you. Celia?
I would add to that in addition to the fact that NIST is already moving in this direction with some programs like the Convergence Accelerator program that they're just starting, agencies like NIST, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, have in fact Nobel Prize winners that are in the quantum field. And so there's, I think, ability to leverage some of the other government resources and capabilities as well. So I think there's a lot of sort of opportunity, and QEDC is one model of a public-private partnership, in fact, and has in its mission to identify gaps, technology gaps, and to find out ways to help address them. And so we're certainly one example of that, but a sort of small piece of it. So happy to be part of the solution, I hope.
Thank you. And Terrell?
Well, I'm not a government watcher per se, but every national policy I've seen on quantum, United States, UK, EU, India, and I'll go on and on, Israel, every one of them mentions workforce development. And watching what the United States does with that, the government is putting money into workforce development, which goes to universities and some private companies as well. So as far as I'm concerned, that is public-private partnership, maybe not by official definition, but we are working in unison. They're providing the money, getting the people to operate, the operators to carry out these programs at the high school level and all that. So I don't know if it meets the definition, but that is a partnership for sure, in my view.
I appreciate it. That's wonderful. And we are at time. So I just want to thank the panelists. I want to thank my Ava, Alex Condello, as well as Congressman Langevin for coming today and sharing your information and your thoughts. I really appreciate it. Again, the white paper is draft. So folks, please provide comments to that so the quantum working group can kind of take it on and finalize that white paper. And with that, I am going to turn it back over to Kirsten with ATARC to close out.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. And for those on the line, I just want to encourage you to come participate in some of our working groups here at ATARC. We have one in quantum, of course, and many others. So there's lots of ways to get involved and continue these discussions on a regular basis and be a part of these forums. So thanks, everyone, and looking forward to the next one. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.